Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Nick Venema, and I'm the chair of the UFV Alumni Association. And on behalf of the association, our board of directors, welcome. It's great for you guys to be here, and we're proud to work today with the kinesiology department to sponsor this Alumni Speaker Panel event. Before we move forward, just wanted to recognize a few people in the crowd. Our President and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mark Edward in the back. Our Executive Director of University Relations is Leslie Courchain. The UFV Student Union Society President, Mr. Thomas Davies. And thank you for letting us use the space today in the great hall here in the new Student Union building. Hope you're all appreciating this beautiful piece of architecture that we now get to use on the Abbotsford campus here. And lastly, we have our members, or a few members of the Alumni Board, Mr. Wayne Ortner, Mr. Dan MacArthur, Mr. Nicholas Dassault, and Mr. Mark Billiatro. For those of you for whom this is the first time you've attended one of these speaker panel events, I just want to give you a bit of an idea of what the idea is. It's all about representing and celebrating the success of UFV grads or alumni, and also just people from the Fraser Valley who are connected with the university. We did these before last semester, so for those of you this is the second time, welcome back. We did one with the School of Business, and that was on breaking the financial industry, and coming soon in November, we'll be doing one with criminology as well, and that's on November 19th. So if you enjoyed today, I encourage you to come up with that as well. I'm going to introduce now our faculty member. We, like I said before, we are partnering with the kinesiology department. Each one of these events partners with a different department. Roger will be leading this one today with his panel of four, whom he will introduce. A little bit about Roger. Roger Friesen is a professor, sports psychologist, and adventurer with an engaging perspective about how to harness your energy to live your life passionately. Friesen combines his teaching duties as an associate professor in the University of Fraser Valley Kinesiology program with a thriving consultancy in sports psychology, helping athletes hone their mental game. This summer, he was consulting sports psychologist to the Canadian national cycling team and supported them throughout the Pan Am Games in Ontario. Several of the athletes he worked with won medals at the Games. Friesen doesn't just counsel athletes to reach their peak performance, he practices what he preaches. He likes to set personal challenges for himself so he can relate to what happens in the performance context with his athlete clients. This year, he set a goal of riding from the north end of Vancouver Island to the south in one day on the June 20th, 21st weekend. He succeeded. He completed a ride of 502 kilometers in 21 hours with the support of his wife and some friends, and an encouraging video text sent from the Canadian national cycling team.
Oh!
Without further ado, please help me welcome Mr. Roger Friesen.
Well, this is a huge pleasure. We have been looking forward to this evening for a long time. It was quite some time ago that my friend Dan MacArthur, we had coffee one day and he said, would you be interested in hosting this event? And he told me what the topic was going to be, which happens to be part of a book that I started working on about a year ago, which is called A Student's Guide to Living a Passionate Life. And so he said that the panel will be around that theme, and so the answer was an easy and an obvious and a quick yes. Of course I would like to do this. And so the explanation went, so the evening will unfold in this fashion, and you get to invite 3 or 4 people of your choice who will help talk about these ideas using story. So who here likes stories? What better way of learning concepts or understanding ideas than through the use of story? And so that's what we're going to do today. So the theme today is how do we live a passionate life? And before I go any further, I should introduce 2 other very special guests here. They came from quite a long distance to be here tonight. For those of you who have been in my classes, Over the years, some of you currently, some of you, it's been a while, we have this phrase that we use from time to time. It says, the sky's the limit. So for those of you who have heard that phrase, you know where that comes from. Would you like to know the origin of that? To know the origin, you have to meet my parents, Frank and Eddie. They're right here. So if you ever lay awake at night wondering where does that term come from, in any case, it's my parents who were responsible for that. And subsequently, that concept has kind of been blown out of the water through the work of Chris Hadfield. I'll share just a quick story. Some of you have heard this story, but it's an important story. Chris Hadfield became a hero of mine not so long ago, and I'll condense the story substantially. In a series of events that again relate to the Canadian national cycling team, they gave me a signed copy from Chris Hadfield. He wrote a personal note to me, and the women's pursuit team told him of some of the things we talked about, including the concept of the sky's the limit. And his last sentence in the note, in the book that was given to me was, and by the way, the sky's not the limit. So we've gone from the sky's the limit to something beyond that. Compliments of Chris Hadfield. So the conversations about living a passionate life, what does it mean to live a passionate life? How do we understand our gifts and abilities? What does that look like in real terms? These are conversations that I have, I'm happy to say, almost every day. By virtue of the fact of hanging out with you, the people who come through our classes, but also the people whom I work with outside of the university context. So we have these conversations, and generally, these are life-changing conversations. So sometimes we may find ourselves stuck, because I'm not entirely sure what the path is. I'm not entirely sure what my gifts and abilities are, and this whole talk of living a passionate life, it sounds fabulous, and I like the idea, but sometimes you don't necessarily know what that actually means. And so today, this evening, is an opportunity to explore these ideas by way of story from four very special people. So when Dan first approached me and asked me about this, he said, you can invite anybody you want. That was no easy task, let me tell you. So I thought about who could come that would tell a compelling story in some unique way. And so that's who we have here. So let me just quickly introduce them, and then I'll explain what's going to happen after that. So to my right is Cheryl Chapman. Cheryl Chapman is a graduate of UFV. She also comes from a very interesting background. She has an adventure guiding background from the time she was very young, so her interpersonal skills were well honed before she even ever showed up at UFV. She was an amazing student. She was fun to have in class because, I don't know if it's going to come out today, it probably will. She likes to have fun, and that kind of is the thread that goes with her in her life. But since graduating here, she became a physiotherapist, and she's also an entrepreneur because just recently she opened her own clinic in Langley. The next person is Zach Bell. Zach is somebody who I got to know a few years ago. Zach is an amazing guy. Multiple-time Olympian, entrepreneur, innovator, initiating nonprofit organizations. Zach is a guy who has a mission, and he has ways of making that vision come into reality. He also works as a professional bike racer. So this is his first exposure to UFV, and I'm delighted to have Zach as part of this panel. Next is Rachel Statz. Rachel is also a graduate of UFV, the Kinesiology department. Rachel was also an amazing student while here. She eventually graduated and went on to chiropractic school, and not that long ago came back to the Fraser Valley and is currently working as a chiropractor in White Rock. And it is an absolute pleasure to have her part of this panel as well. On my far right is Jamie Armstrong. Jamie Armstrong graduated from here quite some time ago, and he was kind of a cool student. He played basketball. He was the kind of guy that if you wanted to have a good time, then just find out where Jamie is and probably all will be well because he'll probably have a good time doing so. So Jamie, when he graduated, I lost track of him for a number of years, but then in a roundabout way, our lives connected once again. And I was absolutely thrilled and delighted to hear that he had opened his own training gym, personal training gym in West Vancouver. He also is an innovator. he was kind of on the cutting edge of what happened in personal training industry. He had some unique ideas, and he has taken his clients on the most outrageous trips all over the world. Crazy things, which hopefully he'll tell you about. Jamie Armstrong, entrepreneur, personal trainer, fitness guru, amazing all-around good guy. So please help me give a very warm welcome to our 4 panelists. So what we're going to do next is we're simply going to turn the next conversation over to these 4, and we're going to start with Cheryl and simply move our way down the line. Each of them will have 10 minutes to share their story and to talk about some of these ideas. I know that 10 minutes will go by very fast. But once we've heard each of their stories, we will open it up for question and answer. And so what I'm encouraging you to do already is to think about what resonates with you. So when you think about a passionate life, when you think about options and so on, what can we take from their stories that might have practical value to you? So after that, we'll open up to question and answer. And once that's all said and done, then I'm going to turn it back over to Dan MacArthur. So without any further ado, Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I guess I'll just start by telling how I came on my path to where I am now. I was very fortunate that I knew from a really young age what I wanted to do. It started in high school, in grade 8. I was very sick for a year. I got a virus, which was really hard to diagnose. I was out of school for a year and did a lot of, I was in the hospital for a while, did a lot of therapies, physio-occupational therapy, psychology, saw tons of doctors. They didn't know what it was. I was super weak, had to relearn to walk and talk and sit up and all those things. And well, you can imagine it was a very stressful and frustrating time for my parents. There wasn't a lot of answers, and in fact, they didn't know what it was until after I was already mostly better. And that's actually where I started to want to be a physio. I was exposed in an unfortunate circumstance to a lot of different professions throughout that year. And everyone was always interested on what something was called, and they really didn't have a lot of direction until they had a name for it and knew what to put their finger on. And that was not at all my experience with physio. So I met my first physio when I was in Children's Hospital, and she just kind of had me in and had a look at how I was. I was a 13-year-old girl, how I should be moving or what I should be doing, and where I was and then where I should be. And it didn't ever really matter what it was called or what it was titled. She just kind of took her knowledge and applied it to, this is where you are, this is where you should be. And since I was 13, I told my parents that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a physio. And so off I went. I finished high school and into university, and I did my kinesiology here at UCFV, and I met a lot of really good people along the way. And I was very fortunate enough to get into physio right out of university, and I went through. So I was really fortunate that everything kind of worked out. And when Roger asked me to speak, I thought, oh, I'm a little bit outleagued here with all these other people. And it made me think about, like, I just have felt really lucky. I felt like everything's kind of lined up, and then I got to thinking, like, how I got to be lucky. And I think part of that is circumstance, but I think part of that is being fortunate to have people around you who encourage you and support you, because there's opportunities that are scary in the short term, but you have to jump to take it. And I think as much as I have had a lot of fortunate events that have happened, and I've been lucky enough to be able to take each of those steps. So anyways, graduating from university through a series of various sort of serendipitous events, I ended up working as a placement in Abbotsford. I had actually been placed in my last university placement for physio in a placement I'd already been in, which was like a total disaster because a couple of placements had fallen through and there was no other place to go, and if you don't finish your placements, you don't finish your degree, obviously. And I reconnected with one of my teachers here from university that was also physio, and she worked in Abbotsford. Anyways, So she contacted the university to have me on as a student, so that worked out well. And I met my future would-be partner there, and he was actually my supervisor at the time. So we met and got along really well right away, and I stayed working at that facility for a couple years and learned a lot of good skills about physio. And anyways, I guess probably 3 years later, we opened up a clinic together in Langley. And that, yeah, that sort of brings me up to date on that was sort of my path. Anyways, so in terms of living passionately, I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, to do is to find your language. So I really believe in languages, and I know a lot of you probably heard like love languages and things like that, and how we express ourselves is how we understand things, and that's how I feel about in life, is if you can find your language, something that makes sense to you and like resonates with you, and you can understand it, and you can express it well. I think that's really, really important in terms of finding your path, is finding what your personal language is, and whether that's in like relationships or career or activities that you do. I think if you can find your language, that's probably the most important thing in terms of living a passionate life. I'm supposed to go for another 5 minutes, but I don't think I have that much more to say. More of a question than the answer kind of girl.
That's good. I think you're going to probably hear a lot of the similar themes as we go down the table here. My story, I guess, revolves unsurprisingly around my perspective on the Olympics, my experience at the Olympics. But it's not really the one that you would see on TV. It's basically the lessons learned from being completely out of control. So I'll kind of start from the beginning and work my way through. I grew up in the Yukon. I grew up in a really small community, and right away I got the sport bug. My dad was a phys ed teacher, and so sport was a really big part of my life, and I knew right away that sport was something that moved me in a way that other things didn't. I didn't know it was a passion at the time, but I definitely caught the fever for sport early on. And through sport and through some values taught by my dad was kind of really what started me on my path. It was basically values around doing hard work, basically giving everything you have for whatever it is that you're engaged in, being honest about that, and being disciplined about that pursuit. And so those are, really basic early things, but they're things that as you go through a sporting career become more and more meaningful. I started from that foundation, then was inspired into a sporting career actually by some sporting idols of mine. I started in wrestling up there. I know now that I'm a cyclist, that's sort of a weird connection, but I started wrestling and was inspired by a wrestler named Chris Wilson. He was an Olympian. He came up and spoke to us in our tiny little community, spoke to 20 students. I was about 10 years old at the time, and what he did for me was he really normalized and humanized great achievement. So I looked at this guy and I was like, okay, here's a guy with really normal life experience, really normal background, and he's ranked second in the world. He's been to the games. He's arguably the best wrestler of our generation, and he was talking about experiences that were very, very similar to mine, even at 10 years old. So, and then later on in my wrestling career, I encountered another coach named Lee Verling, who then sort of laid a framework for me as to how to pursue that achievement. And it's goal setting, and we've all talked about goal setting. We've all heard it's crucial to achievement, but I think my take on goal setting is a little bit different, and I'll kind of talk to it as I go along here. So once inspired, you kind of need to have that motivation to kind of carry on, to move forward. And as I continued through my sporting career, I wrestled through high school into university, and just continued pursuing an Olympic dream that I kind of was seeded by Chris early on when I was 10 years old. And the motivation for me that kept me going was basically the exploration of my personal capacity. So sport provides a really unique platform to delve into your own personal limits, I guess, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's all these different capacities because they're being challenged all the time. They're being challenged by competitors, they're being challenged by your own markers for success, and you're constantly having to deal with, okay, am I good enough? Is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to be doing? Am I going in the right direction? Because there's not a lot of other compensation other than what you're getting out of it yourself. And then the other motivator for me was that sport could provide a really diverse experience. So a diverse cultural experience, opportunities to travel, opportunities to understand the world. And both of those things were vital in preparing me for what I really want to do, which is impact the communities and people around me. Sport provides a really good platform for that. It's a really good conversation starter, a really good way to engage the people around you. And so those things basically kept me motivated on my path through sport. But it wasn't really until I started encountering some big obstacles that I understood how passion and how living passionately and living a meaningful life mattered. And basically that happened through my games year. I pursued achievement, I pursued goals of results, basically, all the way through my career. And then in my 2012 Olympic year, which was sort of meant to be my kind of crowning achievement of my sporting career, went really, really well, right up until the games. I basically hadn't missed the podium in 4 years. I was going into the games ranked second in the world, and my games experience started with basically, ladies and gentlemen, in the audience tonight is Mr. Paul McCartney, which is like, okay, that's pretty cool. He's coming to see me. So, this is really the start of the dream. This is the start of what I've been working for. And pretty much from the moment that sentence was said in the stadium to the end of my games, and then subsequently the end of my year, my whole world just fell apart completely. My games just slid over the course of 2 days. My event lasted over 2 days, and my ranking was just not what it was supposed to be. Basically, I hadn't quite got the training right, and I didn't perform to my expected level. I still performed well, but it just wasn't what I was hoping for. And then while I was dealing with that, sort of dealing with the fallout of what happened, where am I? My wife and I had our first son and subsequently lost him 3 days later. And so this was, as an athlete, I was in a position where I basically worked at everything to control everything, to keep everything within the realms of control that I had. And over the course of about 6 weeks, nothing in my life was under my control anymore. And that really left me exposed and left me in a situation where I couldn't resist the natural forces acting on me. And it was like being on a beach and just trying to stop the waves from crashing. It just wasn't possible. And so I had to kind of sit back and just live that experience and live that sort of the negative emotion of it, and really let it kind of expose the core of what my belief system was, what my passion was, and it really helped me kind of lay bare what it means to live a passionate life and why what I was doing had meaning. So I know a lot of you have probably heard the pursuit of happiness is a sort of a cliche thing that's thrown around, and when Roger asked me to speak at this, I kind of sort of thought about that, because that's a really key term in terms of living a meaningful life. I think people want to be happy, and the pursuit of happiness is sort of where it always lands, but I think it's a little bit misunderstood, at least based on my experience. It's really it's not a pursuit of happiness in the sense that you're going out and chasing down a moment or a spot or a goal that's going to make you happy. It is living a pursuit of happiness. So being involved in a pursuit that is the thing that brings you happiness. And I think that's a really key thing, especially given the subject matter tonight. It's finding out how to be involved in a pursuit that gives you that happiness. And I'm going to go back to the goal setting thing here, because the way I have done that in sport is I've utilized goals as waypoints or as markers that guide an experience. So the goal in and of itself isn't the end, isn't the reason for the achievement. Pursuing that goal has given me a roadmap to have the experience that I wanted to have. And so anytime I come to a crossroads, I can use that goal to say, okay, this is what aligns with my core values, this is what aligns with my passion, because this is the trajectory I've set myself on. And I think adversity and facing adversity, particularly adversity that's beyond your control, often is a really big part of that. Because I think adversity is a powerful catalyst for self-discovery. I wrote this part down specifically because I think I wanted to get it right. And I think anything great, these things can all be achieved by anyone willing to challenge themselves. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, basically on any platform. You have to be willing to let the experience challenge your core beliefs, though. It can't just be like an in-comfort zone challenge. It can't just be something that, you're used to. You have to be willing to stretch your boundaries. You can't be afraid to expose that part of yourself. The core beliefs are, if your core beliefs are truly in line with your passion and what you're pursuing, they'll endure that experience, they'll endure that challenge. And if they're not, then it's probably something that you should use as a marker to kind of redirect yourself to find that passionate life that you're after. And then from there, I think excellence comes from a diligent, disciplined, and detailed pursuit of that passion. If that's what leads to excellence, that's what leads to excellent achievement. If excellence comes from that kind of care and attention, or basically excellence comes from the kind of care and attention that's required to be true to your passion. So if you can practice that diligence towards your passion, then excellence will come out of it, and I think that can be a really valuable tool to leading to a meaningful, passionate lifestyle, I guess, would be the way I would put it. I think I'll end it there, though.
Hello, my name's Rachel. As Roger mentioned previously, I'm a chiropractor, and I currently practice full-time in South-Surrey White Rock. I've been in practice for a year, and my path was a little different in the sense that I actually had no idea what I was going to do when I grew up. For me, becoming a chiropractor was kind of a process of elimination. I didn't even know what a chiropractor was, actually, until I was in my time here at UFV. But a little bit about my story and how I did come to be there. I grew up in South-Surrey White Rock, which at the time was small, very small. My elementary school had max 110 people total throughout the entire thing. So growing up, there was always opportunity around. And it wasn't necessarily because you wanted it. It was because there wasn't enough people to fill a team. It was because, you were in grade 2 and you had to play with grade 7s, whether you liked it or not. So, it created a different kind of environment completely growing up. I had a house full of sisters and 2 parents who were teachers, and the values growing up were always coming back to family and always coming back to community. And family was huge. And it wasn't so much, what you were going to get, it was what you were going to give back from that. So, I grew up with the understanding that if you worked hard towards something, not to sound cliche, but really, if you worked hard towards something, you'd get there, or at least you would get something resembling that. So my path along the way was kind of filtered with that as I went along. And whether or not I realized it at the time, the more I look back on it, the more I realized that, yes, actually it did. And, in my time here at UFV, again, I didn't know what chiropractic was. I wasn't really sure. What I did know was that I had a pretty good idea of what I was good at, and my thing was people. And my thing was, I knew that it was going to be something along the lines of healthcare. Chiropractic for me just kind of ended up being an easy transition from kinesiology. And at the time, from what I understood it was going to be something that was going to give me the tools to do what I wanted to do, which was to work with people, to help people, and to contribute to their lives in some way, in the best way that I knew how. So my process of getting there was, again, I wasn't really sure, so I went to check it out. And for the students that are in here, I really can't recommend that enough. I spent time with people, not even necessarily people in the field, but just people who inspired me. And it wasn't so much by what they did, it was essentially by how they did it, so how they lived their lives. And I think that's, not necessarily something that you achieve, it's just something that you naturally can have. So again, it kind of came about to be by a process of elimination. And so, I studied kines here, and then I decided to apply, and I went for it, and I ended up in Toronto at CMCC. So there I was in Toronto, and it wasn't, I think the interesting thing is that the focus tends to be kind of from start to finish. And I think that's kind of human nature to do that. And I think it's also kind of just how we are now, is always focus on the end product. But, negating the fact that there are a whole lot of steps that come into play to get there. And a lot changes. For me, challenges were everywhere. And if you look at it, it was 10 years of study from here to there, and a lot happens in 10 years. So, your priorities change, your values change, relationships come and go, friendships come and go. Socially, there are challenges. You kind of have to reinvent your idea of what's normal, because I used to stress out over 5 exams, and then there you are with 14 in a shot. And it's really an issue of, you're just constantly adjusting, you're constantly in flux. Financially, you're always feeling a little bit perpetually broke, because you are for that amount of time. Challenges are everywhere, problems are everywhere, but really that kind of goal setting, that kind of getting from where you are to where you want to be, most of it's psychology, because you will always have problems. Problems are just a sign of life. That is just, and as soon as you solve them, you've got new ones. So for me, when I went to Toronto, I really learned early on what it meant to actually work, what it meant to work hard, and what it meant to find some meaning in there that was beyond that end goal. So for me, when I was there, kind of what got me through was, you look for inspiration, and that kind of brings us to the point of the talk, which is inspiration and passion. But inspiration is something, it's one of those things where, it's not, it's highly individual. So for me, I spent time with people who inspired me. I got close to people who mirrored what I thought to what I knew to be the best of my ability at the time for where I wanted to go. In a program like that, it's not the time to try and reinvent the wheel of how you're going to get there. It's kind of trying to figure out, what everyone else has been doing and make that work for you. And that worked really well for me. I also do a lot of inspiration from friends and family back home, of course, because, there's a certain amount of expectation there, but also mostly just because they reflect back to you what it is that you know yourself to be. So for me, that was a big one as well. And in terms of inspiration, it's, for me, kind of from start to finish, again, it is my biggest, I think my best inspiration is, comes from growth and autonomy. So when you're growing and when you are making those decisions and you're investing in yourself, that's probably the best piece of advice I ever got, was the more that you can invest in yourself, the more you have that you can give back to others, and the bigger difference that you can make in other people's lives along the way. And I took that with me while I was in Toronto, and I went with it. And, it's amazing what you can do when you don't have enough time to do it. And someone once said, it's not a lack of resources that's the issue, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And I have found that to be true time and time again. When I was going there and going through school, it was always under a crunch of time, under a crunch of resources, money, relationships, etc. But you make it work, and you don't even have a great idea of how that's going to happen for you at the time, but you just do. And I don't remember too much actually about the step-by-step stuff, probably for good reason. But coming back and achieving that goal and getting those things, those are things that become yours, and you can put whatever meaning you want into them. My caution with that is that achieving a goal is not necessarily achieving fulfillment, and I think that that's one thing that, again, is highly, it's individual. It's what looks like fulfillment to you, and that to me is what gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited in the day. And for me, I've always known that is to be, those moments that you appreciate and those moments where you feel like you are contributing and giving back to other people in the community and in society at large. So I think that's
Wow. That's really why I wanted to come here tonight. I was so excited, and listening to you three talk is super inspirational. And sorry, I think I've lost my voice. I just wanted to thank Roger for putting this together and inviting us out here, especially me. I was at the school when there was a C in it, UFV, back in 1998 through about 2002. And so a lot has changed, and really driving out here was super exciting, and just being here. It's better if I hold this a little closer. Yeah, I was a horrible student here, to be honest. Roger's very, very good with his words. But I was here, anyways, physically, and played basketball here, which was something that I was really passionate about, sports, and I grew up playing a lot of sports, and that's really where my passions lie. Had a great time here at the school, not saying anything about that, I just wasn't the greatest. So anyways, Roger sent us an email a couple days ago, and I wrote down thank you. The first line as to what we're going to talk about, and he wrote, the theme of the evening revolves around finding and living a passionate and engaged life. So I read that again. The theme of the evening revolves around finding and living a passionate and engaged life. So two areas really, passion and being engaged. So Rachel, that was like so impressive, and you didn't even look at your notes. I was like, wow, how am I going to follow this up? So I'm just going to tell you a story of my own as to how I maybe stumbled upon something that made a difference for me. And it's a girlfriend story. We all have a girlfriend story or a boyfriend story. So for me, in grade 12, I had a girlfriend, finally got a girlfriend, a bit of a late bloomer. And she was spectacular, amazing, fit, very active, very engaging. So we had a 2-year relationship, and of course that relationship ended. And, sort of my first love, so very, very heartbroken, very hard to get over. I think I was 19, 20 years old. And so that ended, and I realized shortly thereafter that I didn't like being single, so, another girl to latch onto. And so relationship number 2, and same thing, this girl was better than the first one, obviously. Stepping stones. Again, great person, awesome, loved her. 2 years goes by, relationship ends. Oh, another heartbreak for Jamie. My parents are not 21, 22, are a little concerned about me. And anyways, so shortly thereafter, I meet another girl and get into another relationship. And I moved to the North Shore. I grew up in Maple Ridge. And the third one is like spectacular, fantastic, beautiful girl, into sports, very active. 2 years goes by. It was like the 2-year thing, seriously, like right on 2 years. Relationship ends. I'll spare you the details, but yeah, it's about 25, 26, maybe somewhere in there. I thought, what the heck is going on with me? What's wrong with me? And so, point is, after that one, I sat down and said, okay, something's going on here. So I took out a piece of paper and I grabbed a pen and wrote at the top of the page and said, my next relationship will be with someone who, I was mad. And sad and feeling all sorts of different emotions. And I just started writing down, something that I wanted in a relationship. So it was like, I have this thing with doing my own laundry. Like, I want to do my own laundry, don't touch it. I'll fold it. That's my thing. I want to drive the car because I had a girlfriend that just wanted to drive, so I had to sit in the passenger seat. So there was things out of spite, like all different kinds of emotions. And I won't list them all. But anyway, about 2 weeks later, I met this girl and of course put that paper away and got into another relationship with her, and it was great, obviously. And fast forward 6 months or so, and I found the piece of paper that I wrote after that third relationship there, and it was really weird. Like I wrote about 15 things down, and about 13 of the 15 things that I wrote on the page were Sharon, who's now my wife. We have 2 kids, and it was just like, I looked at it and I was like, reading it, I was like, oh my God, like, wow, that is freaky. I was really weirded out by the whole thing. And I got at that moment that, how powerful actually defining something can be and putting it out there. And I'd always known that because in sports, I'd always, say to my teammates, "Here's what we're going to do. Like this is the goal. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this." And I believed in it, and we would go do it. And so whether it was basketball or volleyball or hockey, whatever it was, I kind of knew that. But this kind of freaked me a little bit that it happened, and this fly is really bugging me. And so, what was the point? Yeah, so that was a real powerful moment for me, was making that connection with defining something, writing it down, and actually having it come to fruition. So that was kind of neat. So I learned if I made a goal or wrote something down or told somebody that I was going to do something, the chances were pretty high that they would happen. I gained a ton of power and enthusiasm around that. And so I tried it in many different areas. I mean, at first, like, when I was a kid, it was around sports, and it was sort of girls like, "Oh, can I date Danielle Arndt?" And then it was around adventure, like Roger said. After I graduated high school, I thought I'd love to run a marathon, so I drove down to Portland and ran a marathon down there, and just really enjoyed that whole journey and process. And so I started living through, what can I create and what can I really get up to, and then it was around family, and now it's around business. What can I do in my business, and how can I make a difference through that? And so I'm seeing all kinds of things open up for me in that respect, with the same sort of procedure. Maybe being a little more intentional around the business side of it. But a couple of questions that Roger included in that email was what inspired me. It's what inspires, and I changed it to an S because I'm not done. Yeah, so what inspires me. And really, for me, it's other people's successes. I really get fired up when someone does something, cool that I connect with, and whatever that may be. So I'm constantly looking for what other people are doing, and that really fires me up and keeps me going. Zach, oh man, going to the Olympics. Okay, I'll do another spin class. And then, for other people's successes really inspire me. And then, of course, the opportunity to succeed myself is inspiring. I mean, watching other people, great. But, getting up to something for myself is equally inspiring, if not more. And then what motivated me, or what motivates me, I just mentioned it. For me, it's really how I can make a difference in the world. I spent a lot of my early life in sports, and it was I had a ton of fun, but it was like me, and I didn't really ever see anything other than that. And of course, now I've got a couple kids and I see a whole different world, and so that's been a game changer for me. And so I've got a bunch of stuff on how I can make a difference in the world and through what vehicle. So right now my business, like Roger said, I started out as a personal trainer, thank you, and it's sort of morphed into indoor cycling, so I've rebranded, so our company's now Method Indoor Cycling, and we have 2 locations now. We opened up a new studio in Kitsilano, and so for me, I've seen a big wave in cycling. I'm sure Zach has too, and everybody getting out there on their road bike and wanting to be involved in cycling. So I'm seeing a real good impact there that we're doing with our riding. What obstacles did I face? A lot, tons, still do. They're everywhere. Everywhere, anything that I'm not good at is an obstacle, and slows me down. And so, how do I overcome them? Some I do, some I don't. Some I get help with, and some I spend time on myself and work through them as best I can. And then things that I really don't like to do that will never get done, I delegate them, because that's the only way it's going to happen. So the obstacles are there, but you got to recognize them, and you have to always deal with them. I'll wrap up here. And this question really stuck out for me in Roger's email. Are passionate life and adversity compatible? And these guys touched on it a little bit. And I feel really fortunate to have learned the balance between adversity, challenges, and obstacles with staying positive and living passionately. And it's something that Rachel mentioned, if you don't have a challenge or an obstacle in your day, if you're trying to avoid that and get to some other place that doesn't have those, I don't, for myself, I'm not, living up and challenging myself and working through those things to really make a difference. So I kind of look for those things and go gravitate towards them now and delegate the crap out of them. So it feels good when you get a challenge or an obstacle and you work through it and you get through it. It's a good feeling to have. I like doing that, sinking my teeth into it and working with people and overcoming it. So that's all I have.
Okay, so we open the floor. Fire away with your questions to anyone in the floor panelists. And I know it's very intimidating to be in this context because it's frightening to put your hand up and actually speak out loud, but just live on the edge.
This could go to any of you, but have you ever been so paralyzed by fear, and what did you do to get over that?
Yes. I went through a really out of university for physio school. Like I said, things kind of plugged along for me. I was really fortunate. And then 1 year out of university, I had some really life-changing events, and I figured I'd had my plan, and then that completely shattered. So I was a physio, but that was the only thing I had that I planned on in my life. And I'm a real, like you said, you're always working on controlling, and that's personality type, it's a type A. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. And the only thing I could do in that time was to find something, anything, that made me feel like I was still moving forward. Because if you're still moving, you're still going. And so I pursued after my physio, I pursued postgraduate certifications, and that's what I did because sometimes it's just time, and then you can get yourself settled, but at least I had a goal of something tangible that I was working on, that I was further ahead than I was the week before or the month before. And so that's my strategy, is find something that you can work towards, and then you're always working towards something, and things settle, and things become more clear sometimes just with time, that you have a goal.
Yeah, to the same point, absolutely. I think I touched on it a little bit in what I spoke about, but I definitely felt completely paralyzed when we lost our son, like completely, like beyond anything I've ever experienced before, and hopefully never will experience again, although I'm sure it probably will come up. But it was the same strategy, exactly. You know, it was finding something tangible that you could achieve, and long story short, for me, it went from something as simple as, eating a meal to 6 months later that had built towards me winning my first professional national championship. And like that was from like not even knowing if I could get up in the morning, not even knowing if I was ever going to ride a bike again, to like baby steps towards that. So I think it's probably going to be similar strategies down the line. You know, I think that's the way you got to deal with those kind of things. And a lot of times all you can do is say, can I handle just how this is making me feel today? And that's it. Like that's all you can do. But that's the first step, right? So
I would have to agree completely. As I kind of mentioned before, you know, it's life doesn't happen in a bubble. And you know, while I was away in Toronto, we had a couple tragedies that happened, and it's kind of at those times where, you know, you kind of make your peace with the fact that it's kind of hands off, you know, and it's breaking it down and compartmentalizing it in such a way that you can handle it. And what can you handle today? What can you handle tomorrow? Don't even worry about tomorrow. But, you know, is it so much as little as kind of head down and read the next sentence, next meal, things like that, and then eventually, you know, it passes and things become more and more normalized. So absolutely, I've personally been paralyzed by fear or that sensation, and I think, you know, the way that you manage it is highly individual, but also for me, again, just a matter of just taking a step back, taking a breath, and you know, taking it really one step at a time.
You want me to say something? Yes, definitely. I had about a year and a half ago, our studio that we opened, in case I was supposed to open up with a business partner, and they bolted at the 11th hour, and right as we were sort of signing the lease on this place, and I was like, oh no. So it was all me if I wanted to do it or not. And so I was definitely paralyzed for a little while, and actually shelved it for a few months because I wasn't sure what to do. And then just like these guys said, creating, I think, is the big one. You know, I get up and try and create something new, or just something for the day, or till noon. I get up really early, and so it's like, okay, who am I going to be, you know, till noon, right? And so after a few months of that, then I just started creating again on that business front, and decided I was going to do it on my own, so that's what I did. Next question.
Do you have systems in place? Oh, is that?
we can hear you.
Here.
Go ahead.
Just go.
Go ahead.
Should I just yell it out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have systems in place or checks and balances or some sort of method to maintain balance in your life with all the different facets that you're involved in, as far as like family and marital relationship and the circle of friends and training for an event and all this? Do you have some sort of method for maintaining balance in your life?
That's a really good question. I got a funny story.
Surprise.
My wife is in the movie business. She's a stunt performer, and she so basically the movie business phones her. They say, "Okay, we got a stunt for you. You're gonna pull out of a moving car or something." And so, or whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff she does. But every time she does it, it puts our whole schedule and everything out of whack, because basically we've got, you know, everything is like teed up, and she does like 1 or 2 stunts a month, but when she takes them, we're totally, so to answer your question, we don't have a method to cover this off. And so I think there's a lot of balls in the air. I think that's what you're trying to say. How do you juggle this and how do you manage your busy schedule? I don't have an answer for that. I could take a stab at it. Does anyone want to answer that?
For me, it goes back to the core values and goes back to basically I ask myself the question, is this contributing to the lifestyle I want to lead? And the lifestyle is defined by what my passions are, what my core values are. And so if an activity or a training or whatever isn't contributing to that, then I really question whether it should occupy a place in what I'm doing.
I think a lot of people mistake balance for like equality, and I think that's maybe not a great way to look at it, because I think part of the balance is that at certain times in our life, certain parts of our life need more attention than others, and I think that's probably a better way to look at balance than like a method of like this much here, this much here, this much here. And I think where that goes wrong is probably when one area is consuming and like sucking everything, and then everything else kind of disappears. And I think probably the best way to manage that is have people around you that love you and trust you, and maybe have someone that you know can notice if there is like kind of a sucking wound in one area of your life. But I hear people talk about balance a lot, and I think there's a lot of pressure, and I've done it to myself too, thinking that balance means equality in all areas, and I don't think that fits with life. Like, it's really fluid, and you need, I think the balance part is that some parts can take more time or effort than others, and then it shifts, but being able to kind of invest in all of those things, but being okay with sometimes you have to invest more in one area than the other. Everything doesn't have to be equal. That's not the standard of what makes it okay.
So I think a concept that came up in everybody's talk was that in order to live a passionate life, you need to be actively pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. But when you do that, you're inherently inviting failure, and that's why it's out of your comfort zone. So could you take us through what you do to deal with that inevitable failure, and sort of maybe examples, like what do you do what are your strategies to deal with failure?
I'll step in. I think it really has to do with how you define failure, right? And really, what's your goal? And if it's something that you're working towards that is to find passion and to find inspiration, I think, just in that process alone, you almost can't fail, right? Because you're always going to be learning more as you go along. And if it really is in the meaning of what you put into those endeavors, right? Because if you put it into the context of this is a pass-fail, as opposed to this is just something I'm exploring and checking out for myself, I don't really know how this is going to go, but I'm going to take it for what it is, and it might be great, it might not. It's really all in the meaning that you put it, but that's how I best go through it. It's kind of take away the expectation of it too, because it's amazing to me where inspiration comes from, and that constant, it kind of goes back to that goal setting. It's always, what is your outcome? What are you looking for? So that's how I would best put it.
That's a good question. After I left here, I moved to the North Shore and started training, and I busted my knee up and started training on my own, so I was an independent contractor. And I did that for about 5 years, and I was just twirling my thumbs, and I wasn't super happy. And some of my clients who were trying to stretch me on a few things and say, hey, why don't you get your own gym, sign your own lease. And it was super uncomfortable for me. I was like, oof, I don't know, all this overhead and all the, legal stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I did it. And so to your question, sometimes you take stuff on that's super uncomfortable and outside your comfort zone. You don't know how it's going to go. But I was sort of bumping along in my sort of previous endeavor, and I was like, okay, how long am I going to keep doing this for? And so it was like, I'm going to try and do this, and if it doesn't work, well, I'm just going to get into something else. So how bad could it really be? So sure, it's uncomfortable, and there's the fear of failure, but the fear, like Rach said, I mean, the fear of failure is only sort of what you make of it. This new endeavor that I've got going on right now, board of tracking money, big new lease, all this new responsibility and overhead. And I told my wife, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to go up, I want to go big or go home, essentially. And if it doesn't work, here's what I'm going to do. There's always a plan. You're going to create something else, and how bad can it be, really? So that's how I look at that question. But Zach?
I think high-level sport in particular is basically the pursuit of the next spectacular failure for the most part. I mean, I think most people at high-level sport are, they have a few key moments of true success in their sport, and it's not a moment you come away from with like really any new knowledge generally. So for me, like the Olympic experience, especially in 2012, and to get to your question about how I deal with that, it was a pretty amazing failure to be a part of. The way I see it, like I entered into it and things kind of got out of control, and because it was over, it wasn't an instantaneous kind of thing. It was a really good learning exercise for me on that topic specifically, because it was like a cascading, impending failure that you kind of could see coming after the first couple of events, 2, 3, 6 events total. And so I think one of the ways you deal with it is, as has been mentioned already, is that you don't take it as a pass or fail. You take it as like, okay, this is part of an experience, and failure ultimately is the only really thing that can provide an avenue for growth. So you have to be aware and available to be receptive to that growth in order to kind of transform it into a success. But then also you have to be, especially if it's a kind of a situation where it's an impending failure, you have to be ready to pivot right away. Like you have to be in a position where you can say, okay, this was the goal is changing, or the goal is unreachable, what can I take out of this? And so in my Olympic experience, basically it was like, okay, I'm at the games, here's this thing not going the way I wanted to. I could have just sat up and like kind of wrote it in and had a good experience at the games or whatever, but for me it was like, okay, no, there's a reason for being here, and if I'm going to get the most out of this, I still need to apply myself at the peak of what I have. And I focused all my energies on one particular event, which was a scratch race, and the reason I did that was because I knew that was a race, no matter what form I was in, I could win. And I knew winning that race would be really important for my inspirational work that I wanted to do within the communities back home, because I needed the kids at home to know that, like, I wasn't just there, like I was still one of the best in the world, regardless of how my week was going. Like I'm there to compete, and this is how it happens, and I had to pivot in the middle of the event. So those two things I think is how I would frame that answer.
Well, spending time with Roger doesn't take long to get talking about mental toughness. So I'm wondering if you have any great mental toughness stories you can tell.
This is not great. But I see it every day because I am very much a technician in my own business, so I teach spin classes. And we call it indoor cycling because when you say spin, there's a whole lot of different things out there. So we do indoor cycling, and I see it every single class, the mental toughness thing. And I mean, there's many different arenas that we're talking about here, and Zach might, talk about something amazing physical challenge. But I'm talking about a 1 hour cycling session. We do a 15-minute warm up, and then we do 4 interval sets. And I see people all the time it's this physical and mental thing with doing a workout, right? And there's a few people that I have conversations with all the time, before, during, and even afterwards, and say, what happened back in that third interval set with you? It looked like you checked out there. Like, what happened? Oh, it's just so tough, Gene. It was just, so tough. So, well, what were you going through at that moment? Like, what, to try to just get in your head and learn about that. And the thing that I like about the mental toughness is when we say we do a 2-minute interval. Okay, this is, and Zach can speak volumes of this, I'm sure. Pain is only a short period of time, and once you're done, it's over. There's no more. It's done. So, for me, I see the relationship between the physical exertion, because that's what I do, and then the mental toughness and how people do that. There's some people that just thrive in that, and they can stay focused, and they know that it's 1 hour and they're in and out of it. Wow, that's a loaded question, but I don't know if you guys want to elaborate on a great story. Mental toughness story.
I think where I've seen the majority of mental toughness is out in the wilderness stuff that I've done. So you see a really, really different side of people there. And I think part of it's because when you're in the wilderness, any situation you come up against is bigger than you. So whether it's weather or water or wind or lightning, like you lose in all of those situations. So I think that really brings out people's true colors is when they realize how small they are. And so I think that's where I've seen the best examples of mental toughness. And for myself personally, and I think a lot of this comes from, I grew up guiding with my dad, and a lot of it comes from him, and he was always sort of like, just keep going, like nothing you can do about it. And I think I tend to break it down really logically like that. So I've had situations where you're in a boat going down the water and you have like 10 people that don't know what they're doing, and there's like lightning coming, and you paddle as hard as you can, and you like legitimately don't move forward. It's actually faster sometimes to get out and walk. And you just want to like just hit the snooze button and not carry on. But you can't, because you're responsible for people. And so I just try and break it down logically and think like, so if I just stop and I just lie in my boat, then I'm still in the same situation in the next 5 minutes. Or if I paddle and I've gone 10 centimeters, I'm 10 centimeters closer to camp, right? And I think it's probably the same in the spin classes, right? Like if you're at this crux and it's like really hard, and if you give up, then you just sit on your bike, like you're no farther forward, right? So even if I'm really huge on moving forward. I think that's really important in life. And so even if you move forward like an inch, you're still more forward. And I don't think it matters how fast you get there, as long as you're still trying to move forward. Because if you just stop, like how long are you going to sit there? You eventually have to keep going again. And I found it a lot in, I started in the last couple of years training with a couple of people that do endurance events, and it's the same sort of thing. And it's always like, you can just stand there, but the finish line's still the same amount of time away. So just break it down into small steps, and if you have to walk, that's fine, and if you can run again, that's fine too. So you probably have a lot of stories about like pain and gain, whereas mine's not, those aren't my experiences. I'm more along, like in wilderness, it's like long-term endurance survival stuff, and it's the same in the endurance events that I do. It's like I'm not a like pain and gain person. I'm like hardwired to be efficient, and so it's not about like pushing through that. It's just like as long as you're moving forward, it doesn't matter how small that step is, because your other option is to not do anything, and you're still just as far away from the end. So.
Yeah, I mean, I probably do have a lot of cycling related stories, but the one story that's been the most impactful in my whole career is not actually my own story, which is a little bit lame, but and it goes back to this coach that gave me all the parameters around goal setting, and the way he presented that to me was at a wrestling camp in Jasper. I don't know, when I was maybe 10 10 or 11, 12 years old, something like that. And he was talking about a camp that he was at, and specifically they were out running. There's a group of them all out running. They ran like, I think it was 10 miles straight out. And they stopped, the counselors were all there, and they said, okay, now we're gonna run back, but you're gonna pair up and you're gonna piggyback each other back. So it's like 10 miles of piggyback sounds pretty ridiculous. That's like, that's a mental toughness issue right there. And he said, well, he's like, nobody knew how they were gonna actually achieve this. Like, it seemed so far outside of what their physical capacities were. So he just paired up with this guy and said, hey, like, there's a telephone pole. Like, there's a telephone pole right there. So you get on my back, I'll run to that telephone pole, then we'll switch. And so, I mean, you can all see where this is going, like, telephone pole after telephone pole after telephone pole. They just focused on that, next thing. Next thing, they knew they were back at the beginning of the run, and they hadn't even noticed, but they were like the first ones back by a long shot. And I mean, it's the same context in cycling and in a lot of the races. You know, I don't know how many times I've been in a bike race and just been like, next telephone pole. I've been in a situation where I'm just like, you know, I could just pull off right now. Like, it would be really nice, but then what am I doing this for? Like, why am I here? So, yeah, so for me, it's a story that encompasses like the whole challenge around mental toughness and how to approach it. You know, it's always find that next telephone pole.
More questions?
Speaking of the next telephone pole, what is it for you guys?
Anybody else? Okay. I have a lot of telephone poles in front of me right now, and they're all kind of going in different directions. I'm at a point in my professional career where it's sort of transitioning away from sport now. So one of the things I have on the go is it's a nonprofit organization that connects northern youth to Olympians, and so I'm focusing a lot of energy on that because the resource that I've actually been able to develop through my experience is just that Olympic family network, and it's something that not a lot of people in the country have access to. So for me, I was inspired onto this path through a direct personal contact with an Olympian, and so I understand how powerful that engagement can be, especially for kids in small northern communities. And so that's, you know, one of the things I have on the horizon. Other things involve creating a better future for the sport. So I've done a lot of work and have a lot of work in the future around driving anti-doping policies in a new direction, and figuring out new ways of framing that conversation so that it can still engage the past, especially of our sport in particular, because cycling has a lot of negative energy around the whole anti-doping conversation. So it's about bringing both sides of it together, bringing the future together, which is hopefully cleaner, and bringing the experience of the past in a positive way and not a challenging way.
For me, I mentioned before, I've been in practice for a year now, and the funny thing about chiropractic is that you graduate as a healthcare professional, but you're also a business. And that is one thing that there's not a lot of attention that goes into that when you're in your completion. So for me, also a lot of telephone poles, absolutely. Right now, it's a lot of practice building. I'm actually about to move practice into Vancouver, and really looking forward to just kind of getting the hands going and just really working on people and getting exposed to new environments and things like that. I've recently started working with several hockey teams, rugby teams, and just kind of really trying to increase the breadth of people that I'm working with as well. Before I went away, I did a lot of work with Big Sisters Canada, and so I'm recently looking to get re-involved with that as well, and just kind of settle in and see how things go for the next couple of years. Obviously, I would love to open my own practice. That's kind of loosely in the 5-year plan, but we'll see what happens. And then, you know, I always am thinking about possibly going back for more schooling, because I'm just a glutton for punishment apparently, but you know, just it's always kind of in the background of completing a master's or something along those lines in health. So.
Good question. So telephone poles in what arena? Just anything? What's coming up down the pipe? the thing that just jumps at me when these guys talk, for me is I always love having a physical goal, a little challenge, something to keep me fit and focused, and I find that really works for me in terms of as a little pillar or something that drives me. So I actually, a couple weeks ago, I posted something on Facebook, I think, and said, yeah, I can't remember what I did. I did this race called the Leadville 100. It's a mountain bike race in Colorado, and it was amazing. And I said, I got nothing, no telephone poles. Help me out, I need something to do. And so everyone's just giving me everything under the sun to do. And so one of the things is called the Leadman, and it's in Colorado, and I just fell in love with it down there. And it's the Silver Rush 50. It's a mountain bike race, super hard, a little technical. The Leadville 100 mountain bike race. And the next day there's a Leadville. Leadville's this little town in Colorado, super unique, high elevation, 10K run, and then the Leadville 100 run. It's a 100-mile run, and a week later, and then a marathon at the end of it. But yeah, so some little telephone pole just to keep you going there, but biking and running.
I like to teach. Like I said, after part of my keeping going was going through my nanotherapy manipulation levels, which is about a 4-year process. And I talked earlier before about languages, finding your language, and like that's my language. Like it makes total sense to me, and I really think I can help people understand it better. And so I completed my FCAM last year, and so I'll be eligible to teach this year. So that's my goal.
So we're coming to the end of our time. That does not mean that you are no longer eligible to ask questions. So once the formal part of this evening ends, you're more than welcome to mix and mingle. I'm sure Dan will explain kind of what happens after this, but I would just like to pull together some threads. I would like you to know, I'd like to make absolutely clear that Zach and I haven't actually pre-planned anything that was said today. So I haven't chatted with Zach about things like core values and beliefs. So for those of you who have been in my classes, this is a conversation that we have a lot, because at the center of who we are is how we make choices, how we make decisions, and if that internal core, if we're entirely clear on what goes on at that level, we will be far more resilient, we will be far more robust when things get stressful. And so that leads to the question of failure. So, I can't remember who was speaking about it, Cheryl or Zach or somebody was commenting on redefining failure. So failure isn't necessarily what we often associate it with, which is we throw our hands in the air and now it's horrible and we hang our heads and whatever else happens in failure. So Brené Brown, if you have a chance to do any reading of Brené Brown or watch some of her TED Talks, she talks a lot on being vulnerable. And one of the things that is integral in the pursuit of excellence is to be okay with being vulnerable, the very thing that we as human beings don't want. And yet the thread that came through all 4 of our friends here is that when we push our limits, when we get out of our comfort zone, we just accept the fact that that's going to be vulnerable, that it's going to be uncomfortable. We are intentionally choosing that, but these are the kinds of things that make life rich and vibrant. So if we think about living a passionate life, if that sounds appealing to us, then one of the best ways of doing that is to make conscious and intentional choices to live out of our comfort zone. And I know that, again, it sounds like a cliche, but that's exactly what it is. Because when we try and keep things safe, when we try and keep everything secure and in control, it feels nice, maybe, but it also doesn't lead to a very vibrant life. So if we want to be alive, if we want to be crackling with excitement, the further we get out of our comfort zone, the better. But of course, that implies that we're accepting being vulnerable. It means that we accept sometimes falling flat on our face. And of course, if that happens in a public context, none of us want that. None of us want to be embarrassed. We don't want to feel shame. We don't want these sorts of things. That's what kind of not only does it make us come alive, but it also makes good stories. So good stories rarely happen when everything's safe and mellow and calm and neutral. That's not when good stories happen. Good stories happen when we stretch ourselves, when we push ourselves in interesting and crazy ways. That's when cool stories happen. And years later, When we're no longer involved in that sort of thing, then we get to tell stories. And of course, we stretch the truth because that's what we do when we tell stories. And the last thing that I would like to just highlight, this wasn't articulated in any four of our stories here, but it was a thread that is inherent in them. And I happen to know these four people quite well. And so I know some of the backstories to these sorts of things. It's something that we talked about in class even today. Even this week we've talked about this. It's called the mundanity of excellence. Because people forget. And I'll just talk about the Olympians. So Zach being an Olympian, he knows exactly what we're talking about. Over the last 25 years of working with Olympic athletes, there's an interesting phenomenon. Because the public sees an Olympic athlete once every 4 years. So many athletes in Canada spend their life in anonymity. And every 4 years they're put on a pedestal, they're under the television lights. They have the interviewer, microphones in their faces, and so they live for brief moments in this fame and glory. The rest of those 3 years, 300 and some days, are spent struggling, busting their butt, doing something over and over and over again with no apparent reward. And yet it's that pursuit, it's accepting that things are going to become mundane. And if we put enough mundane moments together, if we find ways to make mundane exciting, then we're onto something. Because it sets us up for those brief moments of glory when they happen. And they are special. We can't take that away from us, because that leads to celebration. And celebration gives energy. And that's what we'll do next. So that will wrap up the formal part of our evening. So please help me thank our four friends.
Wow, that was incredible. So, on behalf of the Alumni Association, I just want to thank the four panelists for coming out today. I know you guys have tremendous pressures on your time, and you being here is just fantastic. And Roger as well, giving your time and all your energy to this. It's just amazing. So we have some presents for you. So you should be excited. There we go. Now the Christmas is out of the way. So just thanks again for coming out to this, guys. It's really fun to see all of you here supporting this. This whole panel series thing was kind of a crazy idea that we had, and sort of worked towards having this sort of second one. And I gotta say, I think this has been a huge success. So again, thank you to Roger. Thanks to the panelists for coming out. Please do take advantage of everything at the back of the room. There's free food, and I know students. So have a great, thanks guys.